Welcome to Zarila HOA Stories. Drop your city or country name in the comments. And buckle up because this story will have you questioning what really lies beneath your driveway. Meet Daniel Ward, a quiet 36-year-old mechanical engineer living in a small suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas. Daniel wasn't the kind of man who liked attention. He worked from home, kept his lawn tidy, and barely talked to neighbors. But if there was one thing he cared about more than anything, it was his 1968 blue Mustang, his late father's prized possession. It wasn't just a car. It was a memory, a legacy of Sunday drives and oil-stained laughter from childhood. Daniel spent years restoring it, piece by piece, late into countless nights in his garage. But to the HOA, that Mustang was an eyesore. The paint had faded in a few spots, a missing hubcap on the left wheel, and a tiny rust mark near the trunk. Nothing serious, but for the HOA, it was enough. One Tuesday morning, Daniel walked out to grab his mail and froze. Stuck to the windshield of his Mustang was a bright orange notice, flapping gently in the Texas breeze. The bold black letters screamed, "Vehicle in violation. Must be removed in 72 hours or will be towed." He ripped the notice off, crumpled it in his fist, and muttered, "They wouldn't dare." But they would. The HOA president, Patricia Miller, was known for being ruthless. Neighbors called her the sheriff. She lived 2 streets over and made it her mission to keep the community looking perfect. To her, Daniel's Mustang ruined that image. That evening, as the sun dipped below the rooftops, Daniel sat on his porch, staring at the car. The metal glowed gold under the fading light, a silent reminder of his father's hands, his voice, his legacy. He whispered, "They can't take you." Not again. As night fell, Daniel decided to check his driveway camera footage, a habit ever since a string of small thefts in the neighborhood. He opened the security app and rewound to 2 a.m. the previous night. At first, everything looked normal. Quiet street, motionless trees, porch lights flickering. But then, at 2:13 a.m., he saw it. A shadow moved near his car. Tall, slow, deliberate. The figure approached the Mustang, stopped at the front bumper, and crouched. Daniel leaned closer to the screen. The camera's infrared glow caught the faint outline of a metallic object, maybe a crowbar, maybe something else. But then the feed glitched. Static filled the screen for exactly 7 seconds. And when the image returned, the driveway was empty. Daniel froze. He replayed it. Same glitch. Same timing. The system had never done that before. He went outside, barefoot, flashlight trembling in his hand. The night was still, heavy with summer heat. The Mustang sat there, calm and untouched, gleaming faintly under the streetlight. No footprints. No marks. Nothing. Still, something felt wrong. When he placed his hand on the hood, it was warm, like someone had been standing near it for hours. The next morning, Daniel received another envelope in the mail. It was from the HOA. Final notice. Vehicle will be towed in 24 hours. That's when he snapped. His father's car, his only connection left, was about to be taken away because of a rulebook. He stormed into his garage, slamming the notice on the workbench. The air smelled of grease and frustration. He whispered, "You want it gone? Fine. Let's see how far you'll go to find it." But as he said that, something caught his eye, a handprint on the hood of the car. It was smeared with a strange, black residue that shimmered under the light. He touched it gently. It wasn't oil. It was colder, slicker, almost metallic. He quickly wiped it away, unease tightening his chest. For the rest of the day, he couldn't focus. Who had been near his car last night? And what were they holding? That evening, as the Texas sun sank behind the houses, Daniel sat quietly on the porch again, sipping coffee, his eyes fixed on the Mustang. It looked peaceful, too peaceful. But behind those calm eyes, a storm was building. Daniel was already planning something bold, something no one would ever forget. And if his neighbors thought he'd simply give up his car without a fight, they had no idea what was coming next. The next morning arrived heavy and gray. The kind of morning that felt like it was holding its breath. Daniel stood at the end of his driveway, coffee mug in hand, staring at the bright orange notice still lying in the trash bin. He hadn't slept much. Every time he closed his eyes, that shadow from the camera footage crept back into his mind, silent, faceless, holding something metallic under the faint light. His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of an engine. A white SUV rolled to a stop in front of his house. The door opened, and out stepped Patricia Miller, the HOA president. Tall, blonde, perfectly pressed navy blazer. She looked more like a CEO than a neighbor. She walked up the driveway with a clipboard clutched tightly to her chest and said, "Mr. Ward, I believe we've been more than patient." Daniel forced a thin smile. "Morning, Patricia. What brings you by?" She frowned. "You know why I'm here. The vehicle. You've ignored multiple notices, and now this is the final warning." Daniel glanced at the Mustang, gleaming faintly behind him. "It's not hurting anyone. It's registered, insured, and parked in my own driveway." Patricia's eyes narrowed. "It's depreciating the value of the neighborhood, Daniel. This is a community, and rules exist for a reason. You have 24 hours. After that, we tow it. No exceptions." Her words hung in the air like smoke. She turned briskly and walked back to her SUV. The vehicle rolled away, leaving behind a silence that burned. Daniel stood there, jaw clenched, watching the HOA logo on the back of her car disappear around the corner. That night, the house felt smaller, quieter. Daniel sat in his garage, lights dimmed, staring at the Mustang. He ran his fingers along the hood, tracing the faint outline of the spot where that strange handprint had been. The metallic residue was gone, but the unease wasn't. "This car has more life than anyone in this neighborhood," he whispered. He opened his father's old toolbox. Inside was a small, oil-stained notebook, filled with sketches, measurements, and notes from their old weekend projects. But among the faded pages was something different, a rough diagram of a soil cross-section. His dad had scribbled at the bottom in his familiar handwriting, "Always know what's beneath you before you build." Daniel stared at that line for a long time. Then something sparked in his mind. If they wanted to take his car, they'd have to find it first. The next morning, he made a list. Tarps, sandbags, concrete mix, reinforced steel mesh. To any outsider, it looked like a home improvement project. But Daniel wasn't fixing his driveway. He was preparing it for something no one had ever done before. At the hardware store, the cashier eyed him curiously as he loaded materials onto the counter. "Big project?" she asked casually. Daniel gave a small smirk. "You could say that." By noon, the supplies were piled up beside his garage. The neighbors peeked from their windows, whispering, watching him with a mix of confusion and curiosity. Nobody dared to ask what he was doing, not with Patricia's warning still echoing through the community. Later that day, Daniel tried to talk to Tom and Linda, the couple next door. He explained the car's sentimental value, how it was his father's, how unfair it was to be forced into compliance. Tom shifted uncomfortably. "Look, Dan, I get it, but Patricia doesn't back down. You're poking a bear, man." Linda added softly, "Maybe you can store it somewhere else, just until things cool off." Daniel smiled faintly. "No, it stays here. It belongs here." That evening, clouds rolled in, painting the sky in shades of deep gray. The first drops of rain fell just as Daniel stood at his garage door, watching the storm gather. The Mustang gleamed under the dim light, drops of water sliding down its surface like tears. He took a deep breath, grabbed a notepad, and started sketching, rough lines, quick measurements, depth calculations. The sound of thunder rumbled in the distance as the outline of a plan began to take shape. The sound of rain mixed with the scratching of his pencil on paper. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear but excitement. He looked at the drawing when he finished, a crooked smile forming on his lips. They'll never see this coming. When the storm finally broke, lightning flashed across the neighborhood, illuminating his driveway for just a moment. Daniel stood by the window, watching as water flowed down the pavement, right over the spot where his Mustang sat parked. And in that instant, his decision was made. If the HOA wanted his car gone, then he would make sure it was gone, but on his terms. What he didn't know was that someone else in the neighborhood was watching him that night and recording every move he made. Night settled over Austin like a heavy blanket. The streets were quiet, the air thick with the aftertaste of rain. Daniel stood in his garage, staring at the Mustang. The fluorescent lights above flickered softly, casting a white glow across the car's surface. It looked peaceful, too peaceful for what he was about to do. He checked the clock. 11:47 p.m. The HOA office would be closed by now. No one would be watching. Daniel slipped on a pair of work gloves, opened the garage door, and pushed the Mustang out onto the driveway. The night air was cool against his face. For a moment, he hesitated, one last second of doubt. Then he grabbed the shovel. Each scrape of metal against the wet ground sent a low echo through the silent street. He started near the far end of the driveway, digging carefully, layer by layer. The soil was heavy with moisture, sticking to his gloves and boots. His muscles screamed after the first hour, but Daniel didn't stop. He worked methodically, breathing in rhythm with the strikes of the shovel. 1, 2, 3, breathe. Every few minutes, he looked around, scanning the darkened houses, the silent windows. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked once, then stopped. The hole grew deeper. The dirt piled up beside him like a small mountain. By 2 a.m., he'd gone down almost 4 feet. His shirt clung to him, soaked in sweat. He paused to rest, wiping his brow, when his phone buzzed, a single notification. Motion detected, driveway camera. His heart skipped. He turned toward the camera mounted above his garage, the tiny red LED blinking steadily. But nothing seemed out of place. The neighborhood was silent. The only movement was the shadow of a tree swaying in the wind. He shook it off and went back to digging. By 3:30 a.m., he'd hit the right depth, about 6 feet. He stood at the edge of the pit, chest heaving, staring into the darkness below. The plan was insane, he knew it. But the thought of Patricia's smug face, the HOA's arrogance, the loss of his father's memory, that was enough to keep him going. He turned the car key and started the Mustang one last time. The engine rumbled like an animal waking from sleep. The sound was rich, familiar, comforting. It made him hesitate. He reached out, running his fingers along the steering wheel. "You and me, Dad. Just one more project together," he whispered. With slow precision, Daniel backed the car into position, aligning it perfectly with the pit. He'd already laid down a thick plastic tarp to protect it from the damp soil. Inch by inch, he lowered it using a hydraulic jack, guiding the tires until the car's body disappeared below the edge of the hole. The sound of metal grinding against the shovel blade was deafening. The Mustang's headlights flickered once before going dark. Daniel layered sandbags over the car, sealed it with tarp, and then began mixing concrete. The air filled with the sharp scent of wet cement. He poured it slowly, carefully smoothing the surface with a trowel. The rhythmic motion calmed him, almost hypnotic. By the time the first light of dawn stretched across the horizon, the hole was gone. The driveway looked almost new. Smooth, clean, silent. Daniel stood there, covered in dirt and concrete dust, staring at his work. His muscles ached, his arms trembled, but a faint smile crept across his face. "Try towing it now," he muttered. He took one last look, walked back into his garage, and locked the door. For the first time in days, he felt at peace. But as he peeled off his gloves, he noticed something odd. A small symbol scratched into the concrete near the edge of the driveway. It hadn't been there before. It looked like a circle with 2 intersecting lines, carved faintly into the surface. He crouched, touched it. The mark was still damp. A chill ran down his spine. He looked up sharply, scanning the empty street. No movement, no sound, just the faint rustle of wind through the trees. Daniel shook his head, dismissing it as a coincidence, but something deep in his gut told him it wasn't. He turned off the garage light, went inside, and closed the door behind him. As he headed upstairs, he passed by the living room window. Outside, under the dim streetlight, the wet cement gleamed faintly. And for a split second, he thought he saw something shimmer beneath the surface. He blinked. It was gone. Daniel exhaled slowly, gripping the curtain. "It's just exhaustion," he whispered to himself. "It's done. It's over." But the silence of the night didn't agree. Somewhere under that fresh concrete, the faintest metallic click echoed, like an engine trying to start. Morning sunlight cut through the blinds, stabbing into Daniel's tired eyes. He hadn't slept more than an hour. Every time he closed his eyes, he thought he heard something, faint thuds, muffled rattles, or the low hum of an engine trying to breathe beneath the concrete. He told himself it was just his mind playing tricks. He'd worked all night. He was exhausted. That was all. But when he walked outside and saw the smooth, flawless driveway glistening in the early sun, a wave of satisfaction washed over him. The concrete had hardened perfectly. No cracks, no signs of tampering. It was as if the Mustang had never existed. He smiled faintly. Perfect. As he turned to head back inside, he heard the crunch of tires behind him. He froze. A black SUV pulled up in front of his house. The HOA logo was printed boldly on the door. Patricia stepped out, clipboard in hand, her lips pursed so tightly it looked painful. Behind her was Tom, the HOA's enforcer, a broad man with an expression that said he enjoyed this kind of power. "Good morning, Mr. Harris," Patricia said sharply, adjusting her glasses. "We received a report that your vehicle was still in violation as of last night." Daniel's pulse quickened, but he managed to keep his voice steady. "Really? You must be mistaken. I moved it." Patricia raised an eyebrow. "Moved it?" He nodded toward the pristine driveway. "See for yourself." She frowned, walked forward, her heels clicking against the concrete. Tom followed close behind, scanning the area like a security dog. Patricia stopped near the middle of the driveway, the exact spot where the Mustang slept 6 feet below. She crouched, running her fingers along the surface. New concrete. Daniel shrugged casually. "Had to fix some cracks. It's been uneven for months." Patricia stood, tapping her pen against the clipboard. "You know, it's quite unusual to pour new concrete without HOA approval." Daniel smiled thinly. "Well, it's done now." Tom leaned forward, pressing his boot against the driveway. "Still wet," he muttered. "No," Daniel said. "Solid as rock." There was a pause, tense, heavy. The only sound was a faint rustle of wind. Patricia sighed, flipping through her papers. "We'll mark the vehicle violation as resolved for now, but you'll still receive a notice for unauthorized exterior modification." "Of course," Daniel replied flatly. She shot him a sharp look, then turned to leave. "You're playing a dangerous game, Mr. Harris. The HOA has rules for a reason." Daniel's smile widened just enough to show confidence. "And I'm good at games." Tom lingered a moment longer, eyes locked on the driveway. Then he followed Patricia back to the SUV. The black vehicle rolled away slowly, disappearing around the corner. Daniel exhaled, finally letting go of the tension coiled in his chest. He'd done it. He'd beaten them. But that night, things started to change. It began with a vibration. Subtle, almost imperceptible. At first, Daniel thought it was a passing truck, but the sound was coming from beneath the house. A low, irregular rumble that made the window panes tremble. He stepped outside, barefoot, into the cold night. The air was still. Not a leaf moved. The streetlights cast a faint orange glow across the concrete, and that's when he saw it. Tiny fissures, hairline cracks spreading across the middle of the driveway, like veins under skin. He knelt down, running his fingers over them. The surface was warm, unnaturally warm. A metallic scent hung in the air. He couldn't tell if it was from the concrete or something deeper. Daniel fetched a flashlight, crouched again, and shone the beam across the cracks. For a split second, he thought he saw movement, a glint of something reflective beneath the surface, shifting ever so slightly. Then it was gone. He stood up quickly, breathing hard. No, that's impossible. Inside, he poured himself a drink, trying to calm his racing thoughts. Maybe the concrete hadn't settled completely. Maybe it was just natural expansion. That had to be it. But as he sat down, his phone buzzed again. Motion detected, driveway camera. He stared at the screen. The live feed showed nothing but the empty driveway, except, in a lower corner, a faint, circular pattern glowing faintly across the concrete. The same symbol he'd seen last night. Only this time, it was brighter. His throat went dry. He turned off the screen and set the phone face down. "I'm just tired," he whispered again, though he didn't believe it anymore. Outside, under the dim moonlight, the cracks continued to spread, almost as if something beneath was pushing upward. Something alive. And from deep under the ground, faint and distorted, came the sound of a The next morning, Daniel stood at his window, staring at the driveway through a haze of disbelief. The cracks were still there, faint but visible like scars that refused to heal. The concrete surface glimmered under the rising sun, thin wisps of vapor curling upward as if the ground itself was breathing. He rubbed his eyes, convincing himself it had to be moisture or heat. But deep down, he knew it wasn't that simple. The symbol, that strange, circular marking, was gone again, like it had never existed. And yet, his chest felt heavy, like something beneath was waiting. He forced himself to move on. He went through the motions of a day, making coffee, answering emails, pretending life was normal. But the house felt different. The air was dense, humming faintly, as though energy was pulsing beneath the floors. By afternoon, the HOA email arrived. Subject: Reminder, driveway inspection, 5 p.m. He froze. Of course, Patricia wasn't going to let this go. He could already picture her smug face as she tried to find something wrong. But she wouldn't. Not this time. When 5 p.m. rolled around, Patricia arrived with two men. One was Tom, and the other wore a city utilities badge. Daniel met them on the porch, forcing a polite smile. "Good evening," he greeted, voice steady. Patricia looked at him over her glasses. "Mr. Harris, we've received reports of vibrations and noise complaints from your neighbors." Daniel frowned. "Noise complaints? I've been home all day." The utility man stepped forward, holding a metal detection device. "We just need to make sure there aren't any underground leaks or unauthorized modifications. Should only take a minute." Daniel's heart began to race. He wanted to stop them, but he couldn't without drawing suspicion. "Sure," he said calmly, stepping aside. The man knelt, scanning the driveway with the device. A faint clicking sound filled the air as he moved the sensor back and forth. Everything was quiet until the reader passed over the center of the driveway. Then the machine beeped. Once, twice, then continuously. Patricia leaned in, eyes narrowing. "What's that?" The man frowned, tapping the screen. "There's something metallic underneath. Big, too. Could be old piping or—" He didn't finish the sentence. The driveway shuddered, a subtle, quick tremor that made everyone freeze. Patricia stepped back instinctively, heels scraping against the pavement. "What was that?" she demanded. Daniel forced a laugh. "Probably a truck passing by. Happens all the time." But no trucks passed. The street was dead silent. The man with the scanner stood frozen, watching the device flicker wildly. Then just as suddenly it stopped. The screen went black. He muttered under his breath, shaking it. "Battery's dead." Patricia sighed. "Well, Mr. Harris, we'll be back with a formal report. But if there is something buried under here, you'll be facing a fine, or worse." She turned sharply and walked toward her SUV. Tom followed, but as he passed Daniel, he muttered, "You should have just moved the car." Daniel didn't respond. He just stood there, watching them drive away. The quiet settled again, heavy, unnatural. That night, it got worse. Around midnight, Daniel was jolted awake by a low rumble. The glass on his nightstand vibrated. He stumbled downstairs, the floorboards creaking beneath his feet. The rumble grew louder, deeper. When he stepped outside, the sight froze him. The driveway was glowing. Faint, pulsating light traced along the cracks. The same circular pattern reappearing, now burning with an eerie white hue. The air vibrated like static electricity. He could smell it, that sharp, metallic tang again, stronger than ever. And then he heard it, a low, guttural sound, a rev. It started soft, then built into a throaty growl, the unmistakable roar of an engine buried beneath his feet. The sound was muffled, distorted, but it was there, coming from below. Daniel staggered back, heart hammering. No, this isn't possible. The vibrations intensified, and tiny bits of dust and gravel lifted off the ground, swirling in the air. The symbol flared one last time, and then everything stopped. Silence. The glow faded. The cracks disappeared. The air stilled. Daniel stood there, trembling, staring at the spot where the car slept. The world had gone quiet again, as if nothing had happened. He wanted to believe it was exhaustion, a trick of his mind, but the faint scent of gasoline in the air told him otherwise. He turned back toward the house, his legs weak. As he stepped onto the porch, he noticed something new, muddy footprints leading from the driveway to his front door. But they weren't his. They were larger, deeper, and they stopped right at the welcome mat. Daniel stared at them, heart pounding, until his porch light flickered and went out. Sleep never came back that night. Daniel sat on the living room floor with a baseball bat across his knees, eyes fixed on the front door. The footprints were still there when dawn broke, muddy, perfect, and ending just short of the threshold, as if whoever, whatever, had walked there was staring in for a long time. When sunlight finally poured through the windows, he forced himself outside. The air smelled of dew and concrete dust. The footprints were half-dried now, crisp around the edges. He crouched and pressed a finger to one, still damp underneath. The pattern wasn't a normal boot tread, more like tire grooves, small concentric circles embedded in the mud. His stomach turned. He needed answers. He opened his laptop and dove into old HOA archives, public city records, and anything about the neighborhood's land before it was developed. After an hour of searching, something caught his eye, the local newspaper clipping from 1976. Foundation collapse in new subdivision. Classic Motors garage sinks into ground. He clicked the article. The site listed was the same plot of land his home now stood on. A small classic car dealership had caved in during construction decades earlier. Several vehicles had been lost in the sinkhole before the city filled it and built over it. He leaned back in his chair, heartbeat pounding. His Mustang was now buried exactly where other cars had once been swallowed by the earth. That evening he called the only person he trusted, a retired mechanic friend, Eddie, who had helped him restore the Mustang years ago. When Daniel told him what happened, Eddie laughed at first, then went silent. "Danny, you remember the VIN on that car?" Eddie asked quietly. "Yeah, why? I looked it up once. The first owner, he died in a garage fire. Car was rebuilt from the wreck. Some people said it was cursed." Daniel's grip tightened on the phone. "You're kidding. I wish I was. Maybe you should unbury it before something worse happens." Unbury it. The thought sent a chill through him. But how could he dig up a ton of concrete without alerting the HOA? That night, he made up his mind. At 11 p.m., he pulled on his gloves again, wheeled his tool cart onto the driveway, and set up work lights wrapped in black cloth to dim their glow. The neighborhood slept. The air was thick, electric. He picked up a hammer drill and pressed the bit to the concrete. The first crack split through the air, sharp and echoing. Chips of cement flew. He worked fast, sweat streaming down his back. The deeper he drilled, the more a strange warmth radiated from below, pulsing against his palms. Then the bit jammed. The drill bucked in his hands. He knelt, peering into the hole, and froze. Under the thin layer of dust, something metallic gleamed and moved. A soft ping, 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 like cooling metal sounded, followed by a hiss of air escaping. The ground quivered. The work lights flickered once, twice, and blew out. Darkness swallowed him. He stumbled backward, heart slamming in his chest. The faint white symbol flared again beneath his feet, clear now, burning through the dust like molten wire. A circular emblem with lines spreading outward like spokes of a wheel. The vibration grew stronger. The air smelled of oil and ozone. And then a whisper. It was faint, mechanical, like a radio picking up static, his father's voice. "Don't let them take her again." Daniel's breath caught. "Dad!" A single rumble answered, deep and rhythmic, the Mustang's engine. It coughed once, then roared alive beneath the concrete, shaking the ground so violently that nearby porch lights flickered on up and down the street. Terrified, Daniel yanked the power cord, grabbed his tools, and ran inside. Through the window, he saw the concrete bulge slightly upward in the center, dust spiraling in small circles. And then, just as suddenly as it started, everything stopped. Silence again. The driveway lay flat, untouched, as if mocking him. He collapsed against the wall, gasping, trying to convince himself it was an auditory hallucination. The stress, the lack of sleep, the guilt. But the smell of exhaust that seeped in through the vents said otherwise. At 3 a.m., his phone lit up on the table. A new notification from the driveway camera. Motion detected. Object identified. Vehicle. He opened the feed with trembling hands. The image showed his driveway, perfectly still, except for a faint outline taking shape in the center. A ghostly shimmer, unmistakable, the silhouette of his Mustang, headlights faintly glowing beneath the surface like eyes opening in the dark. He dropped the phone, backing away slowly. The house felt alive, vibrating softly, as if the buried car was breathing in rhythm with his fear. Somewhere under 6 feet of concrete, a single headlight flickered once and went dark. The next morning, Daniel felt like he was walking through someone else's house. Every wall hummed faintly. The air vents exhaled warm gusts that smelled faintly of oil and dust. The lights buzzed overhead like angry insects. He hadn't slept. Every time his eyes closed, he saw that faint outline on the driveway camera, those headlights glowing like a heartbeat beneath concrete. At 9 sharp, a sharp rap came on his door. He jumped. Through the peephole, he saw Patricia and 2 uniformed city inspectors. Clipboard, badge, grim expression, the holy trinity of the HOA. He opened the door just enough to appear calm. "Mr. Harris," Patricia began, her tone brittle. "We've received multiple reports of nighttime disturbances, shaking, and possible unauthorized excavation. You're making the whole block nervous." Daniel forced a dry smile. "I fixed a pipe. That's all." One inspector lifted an eyebrow. "Then you won't mind if we take a quick look?" He hesitated only a second too long. Patricia's lips curved in victory. "Excellent." They stepped out onto the driveway. The morning sun was thin and white. Every crack glistened like a scar. The inspectors knelt, tapping at the surface with metal rods, listening. Each tap echoed strangely, as if the ground was hollow. Daniel clenched his fists behind his back. "Strange," one murmured. "This section sounds deeper." Patricia crouched too, almost like there's a void under here. The ground vibrated, a faint tremor that rattled the loose pebbles near their shoes. The inspectors froze, exchanged a look. "Did you feel?" Another tremor, sharper this time, like a heartbeat in the earth. The clipboard slipped from Patricia's hand. The concrete under her heels gave a soft pop sound, like air escaping a seal. Daniel's breath hitched. He could hear it now, a low metallic groan rising from below, a familiar growl building into rhythm. The inspectors stumbled back. "Is that an engine?" "No," Patricia snapped, though her voice cracked. "It's construction vibration from the next street." Before she could finish, a thin fracture split the driveway open with a sharp crack. White dust puffed upward, spiraling like smoke. Beneath it, the faint circular symbol flared again, blazing through the concrete like something alive. Patricia screamed, tripping over her clipboard as she backed away. The inspectors grabbed her arms, dragging her toward the street. Daniel stood frozen, torn between terror and awe. The vibration stopped as suddenly as it had begun. The symbol dimmed to a dull ember, and the cracks sealed themselves with a low hiss. Silence swallowed the scene. The 3 officials stared at the unbroken driveway, their faces pale. Patricia's voice trembled. "We'll be in touch, Mr. Harris." They fled to their vehicle without another word. The SUV screeched away, leaving a fog of exhaust and fear behind. Daniel stood alone, staring at the faint smoke still rising from the cracks. A small piece of concrete near the center had crumbled, revealing a gleam of red paint beneath. He knelt and brushed the dust aside, the familiar shade of his Mustang. His pulse raced. "You're still there," he whispered. "You're fighting back." That night, he couldn't stay inside. The house felt like a cage filled with invisible engines. Every window rattled. The photos on the walls trembled. Finally, he stepped outside into the cool darkness. The neighborhood was silent again. Houses shuttered, no one brave enough to peek out after the morning's quake. The moon hung low and yellow over the driveway. Daniel approached slowly, flashlight trembling in his hand. The beam slid over the surface until it caught something new, an indentation in the cement shaped exactly like a tire track, faint but undeniable, pressed upward from beneath. He crouched, running his fingers along the mark. Warm. Then came the whisper again, faint, mechanical, almost human. They tried to take me. You buried me instead. Daniel's breath fogged in the cold air. Dad, he whispered again, voice breaking. The driveway pulsed once under his palm, like a heartbeat answering him. Then silence. He staggered backward, flashlight flickering. He wanted to run, to call someone, to break the concrete open, but fear rooted him to the spot. Somewhere under his feet, he could feel the slow, rhythmic thump of pistons turning, as if the buried engine was waiting for permission. Inside the house, his phone chimed, motion detected, driveway, multiple objects. He turned toward the street. Through the darkness, he saw them. HOA cars parked again, headlights off, watching from the corner. Patricia had returned, this time with more people, silhouettes holding cameras and clipboards. Daniel clenched his jaw. The air around him shimmered with heat, though the night was cold. The faint outline of the Mustang shimmered beneath the surface again, brighter, stronger, stretching toward the light. He whispered into the night, half pleading, half commanding. Not yet. Wait. The ground stilled. Far down the street, Patricia's voice echoed. Tomorrow morning, we dig this whole slab up if we have to. Daniel's eyes hardened. We'll see, he muttered. Behind him, the porch light flickered twice, like the blink of a mechanical eye agreeing with him. Dawn crept over Austin like a bruised sky. Daniel hadn't moved from the window. The HOA trucks rolled in one by one, flatbeds, diggers, even a city enforcement van. Patricia stepped out first, hard hat gleaming, the kind of smile that only appeared when she thought she had already won. Mr. Harris, she called, her voice carrying across the street. Today we're removing whatever you've buried. Step aside. Daniel walked down the path, slowly, jaw tight. You should leave, he said quietly. Patricia laughed. Or what? You'll pour more concrete over the truth. He didn't answer. He just watched as the crew started their work. The first jackhammer bit into the slab. The sound split the morning air. Neighbors gathered behind fences, phones raised. Every strike sent a tremor up through Daniel's boots. The ground felt alive again, pulsing, angry. Deeper, Patricia shouted. Find what's making that noise. But the noise wasn't coming from their tools. It was coming back at them. The rumble rolled from below, louder than before, a deep metallic roar that made the earth quiver. Dust lifted in little whirlwinds. One worker dropped his drill. Something's moving down there. Keep going. Patricia barked, though her own voice cracked. The slab buckled. A crack raced across the driveway like lightning, splitting the ground open in a perfect circle. From the fracture poured thick, black smoke, hot, oily, carrying the smell of burning rubber. Everybody back, the foreman yelled, pulling men away. The roar rose to a scream, and the concrete exploded upward in a shower of dust and gravel. When it cleared, the crowd fell silent. The red Mustang stood there, half buried, half free, metal gleaming like it had never aged. Its hood was warm, engine purring softly even though no key turned in the ignition. The headlights blinked once, alive. Patricia stumbled backward, eyes wide. That's how. Daniel stepped forward through the dust. His clothes were streaked with ash, his face pale but calm. You want to tow it, he said quietly. Now try. The car growled, low and deliberate, as if understanding him. The ground quivered again. The tires rotated slowly, though they touched nothing solid. One worker reached out, trembling, to shut it off. The moment his hand brushed the fender, a flash of light burst from the symbol carved in the hood. The same circle Daniel had seen glowing through the concrete nights ago. The man was thrown backward, unhurt but screaming. Patricia turned to run, but the car's engine revved, echoing down the street like thunder. Every porch light flickered, every window rattled. For a heartbeat, the Mustang's shadow stretched impossibly long, twisting into a human outline, broad-shouldered, familiar. Daniel's throat tightened. Dad, the engine softened to an idle, like a sigh of recognition. For the first time, Daniel saw what he had refused to believe. When he buried the car, he had also buried the last thing his father had loved. And somehow, it had refused to stay buried. Patricia backed toward her SUV. You people are insane. The city will. The Mustang's lights flared again, blinding white. When the glow faded, the driveway was empty. The car was gone. Not towed. Not driven. Gone, leaving only the circle of scorched cement in its place. The HOA convoy roared away, half in panic, half in denial. The neighbors scattered. Soon only Daniel remained, standing in the smoking silence. He knelt and touched the blackened circle. The concrete was cool again, smooth, still. In its center was a faint imprint of tire tracks leading nowhere. He whispered, "Rest now." A warm breeze stirred the dust, carrying the faintest echo of an engine turning over once more, soft, satisfied, fading into distance. That night, when Daniel checked the driveway camera, the feed was blank for a long moment. Then static cleared, and for a heartbeat the reflection of the Mustang appeared, parked exactly where it used to be, headlights glowing faintly in the dark before vanishing again. He smiled through tears. For the first time, the house felt quiet. But 2 blocks away, Patricia's SUV sat at a red light. The radio crackled on by itself. Through the static came a single phrase, distorted and mechanical. "Wrong target." She froze, staring into her rearview mirror, where a pair of red headlights blinked once and went dark.